So, welcome back to another episode on BMTA's Maritime Careers and Training podcast. And today we're looking at why maritime stories of purpose and passion. And I'm really pleased to say that on today's episode we have Gordon Foote. Gordon, you're currently a fellow of the Nautical Institute, the Institute of Marine Engineering, Science and Technology, and the ILM. How are you?
Owen, thank you. Yeah, it's fantastic to be here. And, thank you so much for the invite. It's lovely. Those that have a passion for the maritime really could do with about 6 days of talking like I could, but we'll keep it brief. Share my passion and that with the maritime, with your audience, and hopefully it'll inspire others to consider that as a career. And yeah, I belong to a few institutes. There's some letters after my name and things like that, but what a lot of your viewers and listeners might not know is I'm quite a humble guy. I label myself on my LinkedIn profile as a humble leader. That's what I've been all my life. I come from a challenging background, found my way into the maritime, and have had a fantastic career thereafter. Yeah, so happy days.
Brilliant. So, Gordon, talk to me about where did the spark come from? How did it all begin?
And I don't think you're really going to believe this, but I was about 5 years old at the time, and my family took me to a Navy Open Days in Portland, in Dorset, which is there on the south coast of the UK. And back in the day, then when they had open days, it was Royal Fleet Auxiliary. There were some civilian ships there, obviously a fishing port as well, but primarily the Royal Navy were there, with what, as a small child, looked like massive battleships and frigates and destroyers and things. And of course, I don't suppose I actually knew what they were for or what their roles and jobs were, but I saw them as great big machines that took somebody around the world. And I think just looking at the flyers, talking to the people that were there, and everyone that took an interest in me as a small person walking around these massive ships, I guess it gave me the impression of the big wide world that was out there. And back in the days, this was before people had cheap flights or went on foreign holidays and that. So, yeah, our holiday was to Portland in Dorset to see a Navy Open Day and have the ability to walk around some of these ships. Yeah, and it just guided my imagination, I suppose. And I guess like a lot of children in that era, you wanted to be a fireman, a train driver maybe, or join the armed forces. And being near the south coast and seeing that Navy Day, it just made my mind up. I must have had something to do with ships, and I wanted to go and visit the big wide world that was out there. And throughout my school years, and as I got older, my fascination just remained with that, to the point where my parents were most disappointed that I didn't go for other job interviews, and had to be forced to, in some cases, later in my education, to go and interview with other companies, because primarily I just wanted to go to sea. And later in life, I saw it as the Royal Navy, and that's what I did.
Yeah, I think mine was a little bit different. So I was always fascinated with engineering and carpentry, but I didn't really have that attraction to the merchant navy or the maritime industry until I was very fortunate to win an Arkwright scholarship, and I was sponsored by Camford School at the time. And one of the gentlemen came up to me and said, "Oh, have you ever heard of a cadetship?" And I'd never heard of it. I was very fortunate to go to a grammar school, and it was all uni, uni, uni. And no one had actually dropped the idea of the Royal Navy or the Merchant Navy and the routes into it, which we've talked about on previous episodes of the funded routes that are available. Gordon, were there any sort of people that sort of mentored you or gave you guidance as you were sort of growing up towards a maritime career?
Um, no, because nobody else in my family had been in the maritime. I didn't come from a coastal area. I come from a challenging, what people call now a challenging background. I guess I come from a broken home and not particularly good schooling. I moved from a rural area into what was then an in a city area near Heathrow Airport. So I was nowhere near the water or the sea. But I think my interactions as a teen then with what was then, I guess, the Navy recruiting service, every time you would write them a letter, because this was before email or instant voice messages, that you would write a letter or you'd make a telephone call to them, and they were always positive. I could feel their passion. And like yourself, as an engineer, every interaction with them, yeah, we get to fix things. We get hands-on. You're given responsibility earlier in your career. And although I did go to interview, practically forced to interview as a teenager, then looking at my last year at school to, large companies like EMI, who my wife to be actually worked for, and Kodak, people that had very large corporate premises that were very hands-on with what they did and fixing things. And I saw that, allied trades, and through my latter years at school, I think if there was any mentoring, it was the fact that computers had come in. I had printed circuit boards. I was good with a soldering iron. I understood what was then really an analog age moving into a digital age. And yeah, they were always supportive. And I think it was the teachers at school, if I'm honest, that was supportive of what I could do. And how I saw it was, I guess I wasn't particularly good at maths or chemistry, but I was really good at my hands and fixing things. And as mentors, I'm going to put my grandfather down for that because, although my childhood was difficult, obviously my grandparents were looking after me for some of the time as well. And he had a garage, and in that garage was all manner of tools. But the best thing that came with it was a grandfather that taught me the lessons of measure twice and cut once. The fact that we don't get the tools out to start with. We actually made a plan and we did a drawing and we did some calculations, and that brought me into maths and the importance within STEM subjects, if you like, about the grounding of how we make, produce or fix something. So from an engineering point of view, it was understanding what that discipline was at a very young age. And I took a grasp on that, with open arms and thought, so if I plan to do something, I know what scale or what size, I'm going to measure all these things, I'm going to write it down, and then I'm going to build something to that plan. And of course, with a grandfather, there was always a QA/QC system and a scorecard afterwards as well. So, it wasn't just bash away at a piece of wood or, the new fangled polymers that were coming in and things like that, or aluminium sheet. It was, I had to build something to a plan, to whatever scale and to the measurements that I'd done. And that discipline meant a lot to me. So I did really well in engineering. And I left school at 17, joined the Royal Navy, and they had their basic training, but thereafter engineering training as sort of electromechanical trades, which included pneumatics and hydraulics. And that was my passion, and I ended up being good at that. So I think, like you've mentioned about all the different routes into or during education into the world of work, they're all important in their own right. So back in the day, probably a dozen people went to university in my year group. Nowadays, it's the reverse of that, where everyone goes to university, bar for about a dozen who don't quite make it for whatever reason. And I think I hold a lot of value in the route that I took. So everyone's journey in life is different. Everyone's capabilities and competencies at a younger age are very different. And you can find, like for me, for instance, that I revisited academia later in life and succeeded at that. But at the time, I wasn't very good at maths or chemistry. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I always say that not everyone has to go straight up Mount Everest. You can take your own route to still get to the peak. So it's not one box fits all type of career pathways there.
Yeah, and I found, not least with myself, but with my own children. And also I do quite a lot of charitable work and schools outreach program as part of the Careers at Sea, with and also Inspiring the Future programs, which are excellent if anyone wants to join in there. So it's sort of like informal mentoring in a way, but you're sharing your passion with a fantastically really wide network. And it's obviously UK centric, but I know and have encouraged foreign nationals that are mariners to join in the Maritime Ambassadors program, and Malaysian and Filipino seafarers have, and they give their point of view. And it's a way of reaching the next generation. And I think in a lot of ways, you can break down stereotypes, break down barriers, especially with females entering into the maritime, which we always hope to see more of. That engagement like that makes it possible, and it's even more fantastic when women who have had successful maritime careers can be very visible on platforms and with school outreach programs as well. But the journey that somebody takes is always going to be different, and I find within those programs that when I'm talking to teens and those that are about to leave school or enter into some other form of education, whether it be through colleges, what were polytechnics, or the universities, or just doing short courses, or indeed vocational work, that not everyone knows what they want to do or what they want to be or what they even perceive as a career. And of course, back in the day when I entered the world of work, careers were thought of as multi-decade events, that you joined a corporate or you joined a factory or joined a company, and you were there pretty much for life, or at least the better half of your year. Whereas in the modern world now, we're seen to be with different organizations for maybe 2 to 3 years, and that to obtain the growth or a promotion or go off a tangent or do something subtly different, that you have to actually move around. And not only is that accepted, that I believe in the modern world of work now, that that's sort of a precursor. And if somebody's been with the same company for 10 years plus, they're more to ask the questions why. Whereas I guess it's perceived that you obtain more and grow as a person more if you move around and have different experiences, which you can see some truth in. Yeah.
So, you've always had a very successful career in the maritime industry. Evolution is over 35 years. Can you just sort of give us a brief overview about your career and how you kept finding the passion for the industry? What kept developing? How did your purpose evolve over time?
From joining the Royal Navy, I didn't actually join the grey funnel line or those big ships. I joined the black ones, and it was submarines. So I think that presented an even greater passion, because still a voluntary service, and I volunteered for it because during my training I found that as an engineer, the biggest challenge, whether it was the asset itself or the logistics or being able to fix things, the biggest challenge was the remoteness and the isolation of operating within the submarine environment. I think as a ship, you can get a helicopter out there, you can go to a port, you can get spares and fix things. In a submarine, you did not have that. So you were trained to a higher standard. You did lots more courses. You weren't any different or special than anyone else. But I think they did look at personality and character, of course, during the training, and ensured that the people they got out there, were real team players, could get on with people. With each other and achieve sometimes the impossible, or the proverbial magic wand would come out and you'd manage to keep things running. So it was that sort of masochistic challenge, I guess. And of course that doesn't suit everybody. Not everyone wants those permanent challenges in their life, but I saw that as something that suited me and my character well, and did well for it. I retired from there, and in combination, after 2 terms of service, I did 20 years working in submarines. So, I mean, that's something special in its own right. But when I looked at a career after the Royal Navy, funnily enough, it was still at sea. So I think, looking from an engineer's point of view, I did seek that challenge. It didn't necessarily have to have a uniform. So I joined the offshore project side of the offshore discipline. So now I go out and build subsea infrastructure for LNG or oil and gas companies, and the renewables, so the offshore wind parks that have sprouted up not only around the UK but around the world now, means that my skills and my trade are in demand globally, and I do quite well out of that. So yeah, I do put it down to luck in some instances about how my career went, how it evolved, or how I succeeded. But it goes without saying that it takes a certain motivation, definitely a certain kind of sense of humour, to tolerate some of the environments that I worked in. And I think that's something that as a seafarer we can all appreciate, because it is a sacrifice always away from the family when you are working. And whether your work initially, like me, was in the defence of the country and security, and then later now internationally building offshore critical infrastructure, then it takes that kind of sacrifice on your family, and your family itself evolves as you become more mature and become older in age as well. So yeah, my children grew up knowing that I was a seafarer, and have adapted well to that. So I wish that for all seafarers, that if it is a passion and what they wish to do, that their loved ones around them and their family can adapt to that and support them in it. Because I do shout from the highest heavens always that it's not necessarily that single seafarer that's sacrificing. It is, of course, the loved ones you leave behind at home and and your families, and it is that network of support people that actually make some of those careers actually doable. And even more so for women, when they choose to have a family, and that returning back to work, it needs empathetic and modern companies that realise that you can still carry on with your career as a female, even having started a family. And I think a lot more companies are coming in on board with that. So I'm really glad of that. But yeah, I always, when I do my out of school outreach programs, it's like 101 trades. So you could think of anything and, a trade or a discipline, and pretty much you can do that in the maritime environment. I did find that chimney sweeps, although they're a thing of the old now, is one that probably not. But when you consider the cruise industry, with hospitality, the retail involved, childcare, medical, so many different, let alone leisure, entertainment, and the catering side of things, and of course the bridge officers and the engine officers to keep the ship running, but a whole multitude of different of roles that youngsters can think about.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on quite a few really important points in terms of career pathways, which again, there's an episode on that we've covered that, and particularly I think the strong messages about women in maritime and dealing with being away from home and setting expectations with family members. Again, we've done a couple of episodes that cover those, but again, it's very interesting to see how um, these messages are repeated and shared not only by ourselves but those in industry as well. For example, you weren't briefed on talking about those topics, but it's just natural things that we recommend. We set the reality of life at sea, not trying to put
Yeah.
a false
And
image out.
no, that's right. So there's pros and cons to all of it, and don't forget that the era that, or specifically in submarines, there was zero communication. So, as technology moved on, and then I joined the merchant navy, we've gone from writing letters and even emails now to the point where you can have instant video or instant chat, on your phone or your mobile phone. So, and with the increase in bandwidth and the communications that are out there, then it's not in person, of course, but it's a whole different era. And in the last couple of decades, it's come to a point now where it's just totally different than when I first went to sea. So yeah, the new generation that are coming through have a lot of decisions to make, not only in the pathway and the selection that they can make, which is something I didn't have back then. It was either you didn't go to university, tough, right? You've got to work it out for yourself. And that's how it was then. Whereas now I do understand that a headache for a lot of those venturing into the world of work is the fact that they have so much choice. So much choice that it's hard to, pick out the wheat from the chaff and what they really want to do. So I think some guidance in the form of mentoring, which is what I do with the University of Plymouth, with Plymouth YMCA, with MLA College, helping the youngsters look at the bigger picture, really. And although they might consider themselves very worldly wise, it's not the case that you can get all this information off Facebook or TikTok. So having somebody that's senior in their career like myself can, give a bit of a reality check. The rough with the smooth, I tell it as it is. So, there are down times, there are bad times. And as much as you think you've got communication, it is electronic and it's not in person. So understanding the sacrifices and how it is to be at sea and away from your loved ones for a long time should be quite rudimentary. But not everyone really thinks of the nuts and bolts of that when they're thinking of a career in the maritime. So having a good grasp of that and what it means, and in some ways realizing that that will be the reality, it does help people get through both their education as a cadet or coming through as an engineer in the offshore world or working in the cruise lines, even as a croupier or a childminder, and that, all those people think it's a fantastic role. But yeah, it does take you to some fantastic places and the salaries are good, but also there's the other side to think about. And sustaining relationships as a young person as well is not going to be easy when it is remote, and we all should fully understand what that means.
Definitely, and I think it brings me on to sort of the next sort of points that I want to discuss is through that common recognition of those issues, those things that we have to overcome as seafarers and as maritime professionals, is that community and sense of belonging that the maritime industry does build. We are very good with brotherhood and sisterhood and shared identity in maritime work. It's something that I think as an industry we're getting better at, and a lot of us do pride ourselves on that. How do you feel teamwork, camaraderie, mentorship, etc., helps to keep morale high and motivation strong?
Well, entering the world of work, I didn't know much about that. Didn't know it was a thing. It's become a lot more in modern times as well, I might add. But back in the day when I joined the Royal Navy, that was ingrained, before anyone really went into depth on HSE. which was basically looking out for each other, or buddy checks and that. The military ran courses in that. They trained people in it. They had experience of how that was best practice and shared that knowledge. So as I went through my naval career, many of the things I was doing was centered around human factors. And we're not talking just about the ergonomics of where you're working or living or the machinery you're using. It was about how to interact, gel, be that decent human being, which I keep banging on about, and considering others. And of course, if you're in the armed forces, it is a form of courage or sacrifice or self-service that you're serving a greater good. So you are one small cog in a very large machine, and that large machine isn't going to work at all unless every single one of those small cogs understands where they're placed in it. Those that are below them or those that are above them, whether that's in rank or competency or experience or age or whatever, it just meant that you had that respect. So building integrity, respect, and the truthfulness about what it is you're doing and being asked to undertake. And of course, having the attitude where you're always thinking, how can I help the person to my left? How can I help the person to my right? That is how the Royal Navy ticks. And when I joined the Merchant Navy, obviously that was subtly different because there's a different mission aim. There's different things that you're doing. But of course, I would like to think that the people that I've interacted with, especially in high-end engineering and critical infrastructure, and with high-end technology as well, that the people that are making that happen is because they're all part of the maritime community. And it doesn't have to be the fantastic wizard that's the ROV pilot that's working remotely operated vehicles underwater. It can be the marine mammal observer or the watchkeeper on the bridge, or the motorman that's at the engine room that I interact with in my role. Each of them understands what their role is and believes that they're part of a bigger community. And I think you see that best really at times when you haven't your loved ones around, especially Christmas time, Easter, or other religious functions that we have on board ships when you're away at sea. And it makes it extra special then that everyone, whatever their nationality, background, or religion is, that will take part in making sure that everyone feels welcome, involved. And of course, each person is missing their loved ones at home, but it makes it that far easier, I think. So yeah, the actual teamwork, because I think in ships in general, most of them are small crew. Unfortunately, due to some legislation and minimum manning, it means some of them are quite bare bones, which is not entirely right. And for safety reasons, I guess we all wish that it was better. And like with fatigue at sea and the hours that we work, that was better monitored or policed to a higher fashion. But either way, it's like all work. I guess, people would complain about the factory they work in or the production line they work in, or even if they're in a remote role in a rural area like farmers or something. There's always things you could complain about the weather or something. But I think for the most part, seafarers are quite, I would like to say, resilient. And I've done a lot about resilience and mental health and well-being working in a submarine, which is invariably a tin can with about 100 other people. And you're there for weeks and months on end. But yeah, the maritime community is something special. And I've seen that recently because I do quite a lot of charitable work and fundraising and that. And I only need to put a shout out and say, look, I'm helping out these charities. They do some fantastic work in the maritime. Could you please donate, just the price of a cup of tea or a coffee? And wow, it's just totally amazing how everyone comes together. And of course, we are dispersed across the globe being seafarers. So it's not like I'm asking my immediate family or the neighbours or something to do it. This is people undoubtedly I will never meet or get to meet. But I think as a community, we all understand what some of those charities do in the maritime. And the impact they have, again, from very small teams, but having such a massive impact around the world, helping seafarers that they're all willing to put in the price of a cup of tea.
That's it. And within that, we've got a wide range of professional networks and alumni groups. How do you feel they fit within supporting the maritime industry?
Well, on a personal level, I think I mentioned earlier that I re-engaged with academia later in life, and some of the research that I've done and dissertations have been written pretty much on that basis as a way of giving back or paying it forward to the maritime. I've done research on complex security areas. So, we all understand how maybe we do around how the piracy came around Somaliland, but also the Gulf of Guinea, the Malacca Straits. There's area in the world where there are challenges and grief, and unfortunately war, more recently in areas, with the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. But, seafarers are still delivering. You know, the old adage about 90% of the world's trade is seaborne. It's still the case. So whether it's energy, infrastructure, or indeed commodities, and what these nations rely on as their output and selling to other nations, it's just massively so.
Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge those, and there's lots of other professional networks and things that can support people if they're struggling at any time. We've sort of spoken about them before. There's always a community and a belonging, and we do recognize the hardship that we go through as seafarers and maritime professionals. Um, sort of moving on then, and I think you're a big advocate for this, and myself personally, I tried to do my best in terms of pushing this forward as well. But how do we go about passing on our ambitions, our passion? How do we pass on our lessons learned? So obviously you've touched on a few things, inspiring the future and so forth, and mentoring. I'm in teaching, but how do you feel the best way for anyone looking to support others in passing on their knowledge? How would you sort of recommend they go about supporting others?
I think it's easy to do, but to kick it off with, you've got to have the attitude yourself to engage. So if you're that sort of right-minded person, and I'm not saying it's for everyone, because you know my son's a teacher as well, but not everyone can teach. People would like to teach, but sometimes they're not really good at engaging, or maybe turning complex issues into basics for people to understand. So maybe might not get the point across. So there are professional elements that are good at that, or professional elements that become a community that are good at passing on that message. And I think I've touched on a lot of them. So the UK Chamber of Shipping runs Careers at Sea, which is a great outreach program. Education Employers run Inspiring the Future program. You know, just Google them, put them in your search engine. You can find out all about them. It costs absolutely nothing. In most cases, they will provide training to make sure that you're able to present in an age-appropriate manner if it's the younger children, or that you have the worldly knowledge and experience to talk about different avenues and routes into the world of work if you're talking at the higher age end. But also, as part of my life as a lifelong learner, if you like, I also like to impress upon the institutes, associations, and learned societies that, should you choose to, because most of them are a subscription, because they rely on those subscriptions to maintain a small staff that keep them going. But they are out there basically to share knowledge, to promote best practice, and be that community and that network that people may wish to join. And with the Nautical Institute, the IMRS, IIRSM, Institute of Leadership, are prime examples that all in a way can be aligned in the maritime space, whether that's science, STEM subjects. Other ways that you can volunteer is through STEM ambassadors, for instance. You can, if you like I do, volunteer, just go out there and volunteer for the numerous charities. So the UK has the gold standard, I like to think, of maritime support charities, and the Merchant Navy Welfare Board, of course, is the umbrella organisation that oversees that and supports all the members that are part of that big umbrella. But yeah, Seafarers UK, the Sailor Society, Safer Waves, they all have an individual niche, if you like. QVSR with accommodation, for instance. They run a port welfare committee, and I think they're invaluable in themselves, because most ports and harbours all around the UK, when you consider we're an island, is the vital arteries of where this either trade or offshore, your renewables, or construct, all the ships, the fishers, everybody's coming in and out of there. So having a port welfare committee is ideal, because it's multi-agency. So whether that's NHS, Border Force, local council, you know, they're all involved, and and support and do whatever they can to the port, the infrastructure, the people that work there, as well as the visiting vessels. So when you consider the amount of organisations I've just covered in that last minute and a half, I mean, there's no excuse why anyone should be ignorant of them or don't fully understand what their roles or tasks are. And of course, you can put them in a search engine and find out about them. But at the same time, like I said at the beginning, it's down to people's attitudes. And if you want to give back or pay it forward a bit, there are some very simple ways that are cost effective. They're tax free. Just volunteer your time, and I think that's one of the most valuable commodities that every one of us has, but probably doesn't realise it. So if you are middle or above senior in your career, or indeed if you're junior in your career, because the mentoring that I do invariably are those from graduates or near graduates or those that are starting out in their career. But in fact, I learn so much from them about their passion, their not only their attitude, but also the challenges that some of the younger ones are facing as well. So yeah, I get to learn as well. So it's not just one-way traffic, and that's I think the beauty of engaging with either some of these learned societies and associations or being involved in mentoring is that you can gain a lot out of it as well while you're helping to, promote either your passion for the industry or you're already competent in a role, or maybe it's just your network. There's so many facets that you can give to somebody else through mentoring.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's a big shout. It's the way the world is developing all the time. Even those who feel experienced can learn something new every day, and we do need to listen to those coming through and the changes in the way people learn, the way people deal with adversity. It's changing all the time. Back in my day, it was very much, pull up trousers, let's get on with it. Whereas these days, there's different sport networks. There's other aspects in terms of how you figure it out. I wasn't diagnosed with dyslexia until I was 21. So I'd went through all school with, no, get on with it, until someone said, no, actually, something's not quite right there. Maybe you need some help. These days, all of that comes in a lot earlier, and there's a lot more recognition, learning difficulties and mental health, and it's a good place to see it being developed.
And rightly so, in a very big way, because as a lifelong learner, I've learned over decades that people learn in different ways, and those are that not necessarily a disability or disadvantage, because my grandson has ADHD, and I understand him totally and understand how he learns in a slightly different way, and I come from a generation where that never existed. Nobody even knew what it was. But people have said to me, oh, you must be on the spectrum somewhere. And I guess I must be so myself, because I'm very good at QA, QC and charts or project work or very large reports, and can scan read and seem to take that data in really quickly and see where there's anomalies or where something should be challenged easy. And many of my colleagues said, how do you do that in a short time? I said, no, I'm just probably wired wrong. And that's a comical term, which is not meant in a derogatory way to those that do learn different than that. But, some people do manage tasks in different elements in totally different ways. And what I've learned through my re-engagement with academia and how people learn is, of course, that there are a multitude and different ways that people can take in and obviously the important thing is retaining information. And like yourself, when I first started at school, it was just, the blackboard at the beginning, and somebody was just lecturing, and it was one-way traffic, one-way communication, and the lessons were a certain length, and you did so many lessons in a week. That was it. Everyone learned that way. There was no different. Whereas now we've got bite sides, we've topics, we've got micro learning online, we've got ways of being able to complete a degree completely remotely. It just fascinates me that the technology especially has allowed that form of learning. And of course, as a lot of people do, and my son included, goes on YouTube. So if he wants to learn something like how to bake a cake or an apple pie, TikTok or YouTube invariably can teach you pretty much the basics on how to do that. So why shouldn't it be a video clip for 10 minutes or something that allows you to obtain another skill? It doesn't have to be so Victorian and formalized that somebody has to dictate it to you face to face in an old cold building somewhere.
Yeah, and I think definitely the platforms of digital learning and augmented reality, virtual reality, and simulation learning, we're seeing this come in a lot more. So just bringing this to a close, Gordon. Why maritime? What would be your recommendation to someone? Should they pick maritime as a career pathway or an industry?
I think, because I think I said somewhere at the beginning, 101 roles or 101 jobs, 101 disciplines. It fascinates me that the blue economy overall just has so many roles that you could do. And I remember going to a school once on one of their open day fairs with the passion of the maritime, and I had a group of young ladies turn up at my desk and looked at all the pictures and thought, maritime, yeah, that's not for me, that's not for me. So I just said to her, what is it that you're interested in? What is your hobby or your passion? Because I like to think the youth, like myself at the time, if you can actually go out into the world of work and do something that you already love doing, like a hobby or a passion, it's so fantastic rather than being forced to do something to earn money. And she said, "Oh, I like hairdressing and makeup." So rather than just giggle along with the other girls at that comment, I said, "Well, you do realize that, you know, that there's a whole industry called the cruise line industry, and you could be, you know, in Fort Lauderdale on a Disney cruise or something, and you could be doing hairdressing and beautician on that as a role within the Maritime." And she had absolutely no idea. And I said, I won't name the particular place we were at, but it was obviously a British town and it was cold and raining outside. I said, "Oh, would you rather be in Fort Lauderdale going outbound on a Disney cruise line or something like that?" Not advertising Disney, of course, but it got the young lady's attention when I mentioned that as well. And said, "You could do hairdressing on there. Wouldn't that be better than a shop down the road?" She said, "Where do I sign up?" So yeah, I think what it is like teaching, and like you said in the past, it's grasping people's imagination to start with, like I do as part of my online presence, is inspiring the future. And I think with a little bit of education, and sometimes it's not purist education, it's just making them aware that their horizons don't need to be so restrictive. They don't need to think about their own town or even their own county or even their own country. Within the passion of the maritime, there, you know, there's a career for everyone out there. Like I said, apart from chimney sweeps, I think. So why not do it? It enables all the travel that people are interested in now.
Yeah.
It's the diversity of culture and all that culture brings, whether it's the geopolitics or where you come from or whatever. You know, it's an international environment. So yeah, and of course, depending on the vessels and the routes that you do, you can visit a whole lot of the rest of the world and get paid to do it as well. And I find that there's also education comes along with that, and I think you mature faster. There's a great bunch of guys and girls out there that will help you along with your education, and not everyone did so well at school like me. But you know, sometimes, you know, not necessarily a teacher at school, but it might be one of the crew on board that just captures that little spark again and says, "Oh, have you thought about doing that, or joining this institute, or you know you can go and do your GCSEs or something?" You know, yeah, and that helps people along in life, and then later on in life they actually realise they would like to do that. And the maritime brings all that, I think, more so than what a land job would do. But I'd say that anyway because I'm quite biased.
Yeah, well, I can fully back you on that, and I think it's one of the funny comments that I always hear is, "Isn't maritime just about boats?" And I always have to try and open up people's horizons on what it can offer. Gordon, thank you so much for taking your time, and thank you to all of those out there who work in the marine industry and help to inspire those moving forward. I think it's something that we need to keep doing, keep raising the awareness to those young
Yeah.
people about the opportunities, but also about the diversity, and be honest about the industry. So then those who go into it have a fully perspective view on what it's about, both good and bad, because again, it's all about balance. But thank you so much for your time. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you, and obviously, I'm sure our paths will cross again in the future.
Thank you much. Thank you so much, Ryan. Yeah, it's great. And thanks to all your listeners out there paying attention, and whatever I come out with basically inspire the future. And if you do one thing today, go and talk to one of the youngsters in the maritime. Go and inspire them. I'm sure they'll love it.
Thank you very much.